Well, good afternoon. This is Don Arms with the Oklahoma State Firefighter Association. We're here in the beautiful Firefighter Museum here in Oklahoma City that we are just extremely proud of. This is a great spot with a lot of firefighter history, and this is the second installment of a new program that we're doing with OSFA called the Firehouse Chronicles. And it's stories from some of our guys that have seen a lot in the fire service, and we're really excited today to have an old friend of mine here with us, Mr. George Fina. And George, you're welcome. First of all, welcome. We're glad you could be here and just visit with us a little bit about your career. You're kind of one of the guys in my mind that kind of raised me to take care of firefighters, and so I've really always been really proud of you and I and our relationship. And I'm going to start my timer here so I can kind of keep you under control.
Yeah.
But
well, it's always been a good relationship.
It has. I've always enjoyed. You taught me a lot, and as a young legislator, and then now as a government relations person that helps to look after firefighters and all that implies. And we've got old ones aging out, new ones coming in. It's a complete revolution. It just keeps turning, and the new ones come.
I'm learning from you now.
Well, I don't know about that. That's kind of you, but as we talk about George's career, and we're going to talk about several things that you've done and seen in your time, and some of it will be firefighting, and some of it will be some of your things that you do for fun, and some of the places you've been. So I would like to start, and George has a distinct honor of having an award from the Oklahoma State Firefighter Association named after him, called the Flambeau. Lance, could you hand me that? And we're very relaxed here, and we're in an active museum, so there may actually be, thank you, sir, there may actually be, well, thing's heavy, isn't it? There may actually be some kids come through and things like that. We're just going to roll with it. Again, this is just a relaxed interview. I just kind of wanted to capture some of George's stories, but the Flambeau Award is named after you. And what's your understanding of what one of these actually is?
Basically, I think the award was for leadership. And after I heard the story of how that fella who led him into the fires, I thought, man, that was a great way to put one together. But I don't know, but I never carried that one in my
Well, I'm not
past.
sure. I've heard, George, that this was yours. I don't know. I didn't know if this was actually your Flambeau. But
it's probably one of the biggest honors I ever had, and I was really knocked my socks off when they did that. But to think about what kind of person that had to do that, and I don't even think I'm worthy to be compared with that guy, because he was there. He had to be the first one in, and if anybody's a firefighter and you're the first one in and nobody else is there, it's not a fun trip. So he had to be a good man. Well,
and the Flambeau is actually a torch. Is that right? I mean, what I understand and what I've studied a little bit about it. But this Flambeau actually resides here at the Firefighter Museum at the State Firefighter Association. And it was interesting. I've walked by this, as you said earlier, we've walked by this many, many times at events and things like that here in the museum, but I never paid that much attention to it. This is actually from Ben Franklin's days. They say this Flambeau is 288 years old. And the fact that this even still exists, but it is in the horse-drawn firehouse days, they tell me that this Flambeau was the guy carried it out front, as you said, and he lit the way. There's no, maybe some gas streetlights in those days. You think of Ben Franklin's time. I mean, the fact that this still exists is amazing. But the fact remains that it is the guy that lights the way, and I think that's what the award's about, is the fact that you have lit the way for many, many young firefighters. In fire business as well as legislative things at the Capitol, and just you've been that guy that carried this Flambeau, and that's why the Flambeau Award, I think, is named after you. I know you don't feel deserving, but I think a lot of us would disagree.
It's a pleasure. It's always been a pleasure to me to be with the guys. And it's always easy for me to talk about the fire department. It's been my life. And so if it, you know, if I've done some things that have helped, we need to oil that.
I was going to say, well, I think, yeah, rather obviously, we need to get on the museum management.
If I've done anything to help make things better, you know, I'll always have those accomplishments. Not so much the Flambeau Award, but things that, and maybe even now they don't even make a dent, but when you do those things, you know, you feel like, man, I've done something today. And you know, I always compared when being on the fire department, if you don't do anything that day, you think, well, maybe the day's wasted. But a guy that's building birdhouses, he gets to the day, he looks back and he can see, man, I did all this today. Sometimes you never know things that you work on hard at, and then they show up weeks or months later.
And, the fruits, maybe.
Exactly. And so but you know, you just keep on doing it. Nobody, all of us that have worked so hard to get this cost of living increase, nobody thought 13 years. Somebody look at you and think, 13 years? Yeah, 13 years, and it's always been the front runner all the time. Yeah. And so
let's talk about your firefighting career. So you were an Oklahoma City firefighter, is that right? And kind of give me a timeline when you came into the fire service.
I went to work in May of 1962, but I took the test with 167 guys.
Wow.
And only 3 of us passed. And, you know, it was pretty easy. I was young and stout, you know, you could do that. And the test was on the military side. So I didn't have any problem. I just breezed through. Some of them guys, you know, had not been anywhere, and I'd already been in the reserves when I was in high school. So it went pretty easy. But Charlie Littleton and Raymond Osterman, and Raymond had been on the job. And we all 3, when we got 3, I got hired. I was hired the last one, May of '62. Wow. And I was 21, and a few days later I turned 22 years old.
So there were 167 applicants.
The test, yeah.
And was it what kept most of them out of it? Physical?
I don't know.
Just different things, maybe.
Yeah, you know, each one you had a number. So after each, there was like 3 tests, and after each test they'd read the numbers off that didn't stay. And so they kind of, keep going, and you're waiting for your number to be called, and and you're sitting there, and then all these people are leaving, and pretty soon there's no more to be called. But wow. I don't the agility test. I mean, for a young guy, was no big deal. There was 2 written tests, as I remember, and one was just kind of a written test to check your brain power. I probably should have failed that one. And then the next one is how you were maybe conditioned to be a firefighter. I don't remember all of that, but I do remember that we bought all of our own equipment. It cost $10 a month for a year to pay for your. Now the only thing they furnished you was the funny story I'll tell you, but was the oil field hat. You know, the old,
like a hard hat?
Yeah, a little hard hat. And a badge. And my badge was number 36, I believe. Or anyway, and it was used, pretty much used. And when I got to the fire station, I saw that number and said, that guy just got fired. So, yeah, he wrote a song and went to the chief's office and played his guitar and sang it to the chief. That was his last day there.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I thought, well, I had that, and they said, all these guys talk about going to school and I'd had a little firefighting in the Navy, but anyway, they said, put your gear in the middle of the floor, and whatever goes, jump on it. So in the middle of the night, we get a fire, and it's a third alarm fire. So they put me on the squad, and I went to the southwest part of town, and the place we went to had been a movie theater, and they made it into a nightclub. So I'll get in after, but anyway, the floors were like so far out, drop down so far out, because movie theaters are on the
Oh yeah, slanted towards it. Yeah.
So anyway, the captain says, "This is bad. I don't have time to worry about you. You just stay here." And so I stayed with the rig, and around here comes another chief. Didn't know whether I was new or whatever. I look like a duck, quack like a duck, so you're a duck. He said, "What are you doing, son?" I said, "Captain told me to stand by." He said, "Well, you get you an axe. I want you to go in, and there's guys chopping into that floor, and you'll hear them, and you'll see flame coming up once in a while." He said, just go in and go and help them." So I started in, and I could hear them, and it was black, and smoke was so thick, no mask. Anyway, I could hear and I could see fire flash up every once in a while, and I stepped in a place and fell through the floor. I screamed like a little girl, but I only went that far down.
Well,
that was my first experience.
yeah, I would say that would, yeah, and you didn't quit.
So. No. I'm glad nobody heard me, because I would have never lived that one down, I'll guarantee you.
You had a name?
Yeah.
Forever?
Yeah.
What was so you started in 62,
mm-hmm.
and then how long were you active as a firefighter?
Till 65, I think it was. Okay. Early 65, late 64. So, okay. And during that time, funny thing, when I took the driver's test, only 3 of us passed. I don't know what 3s have been my number, I guess. And they didn't promote us. They waited until they took another test, and then they put us in with those 3. But when then captain was a few years later, but I drove about 3 different district chiefs,
mm-hmm.
rescue squad for a long time. And
so you were actually in the fire service, though. How long till you retired?
Let's see. Well, 20, I think 23 and a half years.
So it's a pretty good career, especially, yeah. and I keyed on something when you were earlier, you were talking about going into the old nightclub that used to be a movie theater, and no masks, I mean, tell me about equipment. You've been around a good while, you've seen when you started. And
they had those masks with the canister mask. Mm-hmm. They got them from the service. And they told me when I went through boot camp, Navy, if you had that mask and it got wet, get rid of it. I don't know if it was explosive or what, but I don't know.
Maybe ineffective.
Yeah. Anyway, the minute one of those things got wet, you were like breathing through a brick. So there was always maybe one self-contained on those rigs, and nobody would take it. I don't need to do it. Well, it was kind of funny. These old guys, and I'm younger, and they're standing up there fighting fire, breathing that smoke, and I think, the hell, how come I can't do that? I'm in better shape than they are. They were cutting sponges, about 2-inch sponges, and stick them in their mouth and breathe through those sponges. Wow. So, and I've never paid attention to that, but I was told that later by a chief I was driving. And I said, I can't do this. And he said, those guys were breathing through those sponges.
So somebody just decided that
picked it up somewhere.
There's no filter out here. Today you never go in without breathing apparatus or what we call Scots and whatever they are now, but the equipment is,
right.
You'd say better.
Yeah.
Safer.
Yeah. Good
just technology's advanced.
I think some of the first masks were just oxygen too, was kind of a dangerous thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking of fire maybe.
Yeah.
So they would breathe through us. Those old guys would breathe through a sponge.
Right.
Interesting. I guess that's innovative, isn't it?
And somebody had their thinking hat on.
I was going to say, you think about just the fact that you're at least you're getting some filtration.
And
interesting.
So that, you know, and the other thing was to get out of a fire. I never smoked then, and them guys were here. I'm choking. I'd say, "Got a cigarette?" All that light, you know, you'd pull a pack out that was all wrinkled and wet, and they'd light up a cigarette. I thought maybe that was another trick, but it wasn't. But those were tough guys. You got to realize when I went to work, those guys were World War II vets, football players. We had a bunch of football players on. I worked with one guy, B.W. Scott, and B.W. just passed away. He's one of the last guys from my station, and he played for OU. He played for OU when they lost to Notre Dame. So
interesting.
We were sitting there. We'd play dominoes, and B would be just knocking you dead there. And I'd say, "Hey, B, when you guys played the Notre Dame," I said, "and you lost," I said, "you go to mass the next morning?" And up and go to the table.
Game over.
Yeah. That was a good way, if you were losing, it was a good way to even it up. But.
So it's been, in however long that is, 60, I was born in 61, so I know about how long that was ago. That you've seen a lot of improvement in safety and just everything. I mean, the guys are, you know, more equipped and.
Well, we had khakis, gray khakis when I went to work. You bought yourself. And then a few years later, you got a clothing allowance, and then we had a certain place to get shirts and pants. Well, the pants were synthetic back then. You know, they were like 50-50 or whatever. That's not much fun if you step through a windowsill and that, because in the daytime, only boots you had on is your day boots. That could cause you a little problem. And then we went to a better uniform that where you didn't have to worry about it. It couldn't keep you from burning up, but it protected you.
Maybe you advanced maybe the protection.
And all those things were important. And you know, and it was always back then it was always a deal between the union and the fire department, and they're all, you know, no matter what. Sometimes when you think about division, you're all firefighters, no matter whether you're a chief or, you know, a guy on that. And I remember when they formed the union, and there was a lot of controversy, but when it all gets done, you're all the same. You all went through the same things.
Everybody starts at the bottom, kind of on the bottom rung.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you mentioned earlier that you had a prior career to firefighting in the Navy, correct?
Yeah. I went in Navy Reserves, and then when I was on the fire department, I would take my 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I know you're getting to one of the deals. I took my 2 weeks and was supposed to go to Panama.
Okay.
So we were on a ship and we left Charleston and we were heading to Panama. I was a second-class storekeeper. So anyway, we got turned around. Somewhere around Key West or somewhere like that. And they turned us around and sent us to Cuba. And all of a sudden, the president came on, talked there. You know, he had this deal about what was going on. And so we got pretty close. We went into general quarters because we had stopped our ship had cornered a ship there that was coming out of Czechoslovakia, had buses on them with missiles in them. And so anyway, my job was the lower handling room under one of the gun mounts, and we had all the black powder cases.
Okay.
And they were stuck to the overhead. And so when we need them, we put them on an elevator and they'd go up. And I was in charge of those guys, so I had the earphones on. And I could hear everything that's going on. So the CIC, which is the main deal, they radioed, and one guy called in. He said, "Yeah," he said, "we're okay now." So two jets went over the bow. And another guy said, "You think we're okay?" The stars were red on that sun. I thought, man, if this thing blows up, we'll never see daylight. They'll never find
it. What year would this be? Is that the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yeah.
And kind of what we know as the Bay of Pigs?
No, I don't think that was the crisis when they had the missiles over there. I think Bay of Pigs was another deal.
Okay, you weren't involved in the Bay of Pigs? Okay.
No,
but the Cuban Missile Crisis was something
I was there for 2 weeks. I thought we'd never go. I never seen so many ships and so much.
And you were just in the Navy Reserve at that point, an active firefighter, still in the reserves, but ended up at the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, it was just an accident. I thought, well, I'm going to have this neat little trip to South America.
Best laid plans.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hilarious.
And I didn't think I was coming back for a while because of what was going on. And but at the end of 2 weeks, the ship stayed out there, and they picked up about 3 or 4 of us and took us back.
So they rolled you back into where you could get back to the firehouse and do your thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you have also another piece of the interesting, what I think is interesting, George Fina story, and that is you're a drag racer. And that's an interesting. I always thought that was a lot of guys have different things. Some guys fish, some guys golf, some guys drag race.
Yeah.
Tell us about your drag racing career.
Well, I started out when I was in high school, about 16 or 17, and me and this other guy, we built a drag car. I mean, the one with now that you see with the parachutes and all that, except the motors in the front. And we did all this and just fine-tuned this thing. Right now, it'd probably look like a Model T compared to the cars they got. Yeah. And so we got finished, and we were at the racetrack. And he said, "You going to drive?" I said, "Well, I thought you were going to drive." I'm not too sure about getting this thing. It'd probably run about 140 in the quarter. He said, "Well, I thought maybe you better drive." He said, "You're skinnier than I am, so you can."
So I'm sure being that age, you had plenty of money, so the tires were probably real good.
Yeah, and you wore, for a fire suit, you wore a leather jacket and a football helmet.
Oh my!
And so anyway, we flipped, and I don't won or lost, but I took that. I made the first run. I drove it from then on, and then as time went on, kids and what it'd take to make a living. So I kind of dropped out of it. Well, excuse me. They opened a new drag strip, and so they were wanting to get guys that knew what we were doing. So I ran the hot gate. In other words, all the cars, big cars that come through, I'd line them up and say, "You can go now," or whatever. So I was talking to this one guy. He was a mechanic on this car, and I said, "Man, it's kind of a neat looking car." He said, "Well, we got another one." I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "You want to come look at it?" So during the week, I went and looked at it, and I bought it. Brought it home. Didn't have a motor, and I had an old hot rod. I traded the hot rod for a motor.
Okay.
Put it in, and I started racing again. And one day a guy told me, he said, there's a space for a dual engine car. He said, "You ought to build a dual engine car."
Oh, wow. Are these rail dragsters?
Yeah.
Now that we're, okay.
I had 2. So I built it, me and another guy built it. and had two 364 cubic inch small blocks.
Gee.
And so anyway, it never would run very fast. It sounded like a beast coming up. Well, every time I'd let the gas off, she'd just kind of putt down there. I thought, man, this is embarrassing as hell, because I'd done pretty good before, you know.
Sure.
There was a kid standing there, and he said, you know, I don't know, never saw him again. He said, looks like you got all the wires from your switch into one switch. And he said, they may be backing up on you. He said, why don't you just disconnect them? I bet this car would run pretty good. And so I did. I thought, hell, I'm going to shut it off. And I thought, well, I'll just pull the fuel supply, shut her down. So I went up there, man, when I roared up, all the gravel that, you know, even in asphalt, it started hitting me in the face, looked like somebody shot me, because I nailed it a little bit. And when I went over there and nailed it, and I sat in smoke for just a little while. And from then on, it just, you know, kept going.
So you had an electrical problem. Those two engines weren't quite communicating
What was happening, each one has their own pulsation, and they were in between each other.
Right.
And so when one would fire, it'd kill the other one.
Ah, okay.
And so, yeah.
Something you hadn't thought all the way through.
No.
Probably wasn't a whole lot of technology to go from, and certainly wasn't any YouTube that you could look at to figure out.
No, and you had to build it. But
to figure it out, didn't you?
Then we started we won a lot of races. Then we're in World Championship. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you a funny story. We had raced at Oklahoma City. So we won, and Bill, there was a young kid that was with me all the time. And he said, you know, they're racing in Amarillo. And I said, really? He said, we can go there. He said, are you off? I said, yeah, I don't have back to work till Monday. So we went to Amarillo and we won. So he said, you know, they're racing in Tulsa Sunday. I said, oh, let's go. So we went to Tulsa, and early in the morning, I got more pleasure out of this than anything. Used to wear a white shirt and white pants, and they were greasy, dirty. The car looked like it was a pile of junk because it had an open trailer. So I was sitting on the edge of the trailer early in the morning drinking a cup of coffee. And these guys, all in their fancy suits, were out of Detroit, Shaky Pizza. I'll never forget that. And they came up, and the driver was trying to promote himself. And he said, I heard him tell the guy that their sponsor said, we got to race this car. So anyway, they look it over and laugh, and then whatever. And so he walks about 10 feet. He said, what's the record in this thing? I said, it's either 799 or something seconds. And he took about another 2 steps, and he said, who holds that record? I said, I do.
And you had the Shakey's Pizza guys there.
Yeah.
So did you get the sponsorship?
Yeah, I didn't get the sponsorship. I had Chevrolet. That was better than anything. But, yeah, we beat them. We won Tulsa, too. It'll never happen again. Never, ever.
And you still dabble in hot rods a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of keeps you some reason to get up and go in the morning.
Oh, yeah. I still build a few cars. But now I've got some nice cars that are my own. But get behind the wheel, and you're 18 again. You know,
I bet.
It's just like if I crawled up in the fire truck, I'd feel the same way, you know. So, but firefighting's always been the love of my life, and racing, you know, it's pretty great. I enjoyed it. And one day, Barbara and I were watching a movie, or not a movie, something on TV, was what you would like to do again. How would you like to relive your life? And so we watched through this, and she said, what would you like to do again, honey? And I said, I'd like to make one more hot fire and one more pass at 200 miles an hour. She said, well, big boy, that ain't going to happen.
That ain't going to happen.
So, yeah, that's never, I've loved firefighting. As you know, I still keep doing it.
Well, yeah, that's one reason we're sitting here is because you could have gone to the house years ago and just forgotten about it, and you've stayed active. And I think that's what associations like this rely on, is guys that are willing to stay active. Mm-hmm. It's not unlike Native American tribes teaching their language. Right. The older ones teach it to the younger ones, and you hopefully pass that on. Right. But I think that's one thing that I, kind of in a summation here, I think that's one thing about you, and that's one reason the Flambeau Award was named after you, is because you have lit the way. I mean, there's a lot of young guys that come in, and you guided them, and younger meaning various stages, because as you know, when you're 21 or 2 years old, the last thing you're worried about is an association or your retirement or the leadership structure, any of the things that the young ones have to learn along.
That's exactly. I tell these guys, the guys said, well, we get young people involved, and I said, they'll figure it out.
They have to be at a time in their life when they kind of get to that point. And it always, when you're young, you don't always see the importance. So.
I tell those guys all the time, when you sit down and drink coffee, with a bunch of old guys, what do you talk about? Firefighting.
Right.
Or or your pension. Mm-hmm. But it's always the same.
Yeah.
And none of us are any different.
Right.
None of us are any different. That's why, I don't quit, because it keeps me being a firefighter.
Well, you spent your life. I mean, you spent your life in and around it, and with the brief detours through the Navy and the drag racing hobby and all that. So you have how many children now? 5. And there's
4 boys.
4 boys and one girl. And I know, of course, a couple of your boys. And so, so was anybody a firefighter prior to you, or is that new for
Jerry,
you?
the one that has the boot shop, he tried to. He took when I took the test for Oklahoma City, but he's real hyper, and his blood pressure was sky high. Nothing wrong with him, it's just him. He was so excited to be it. And Mike, my youngest son, I always thought maybe he would have done it. He said, I don't like climbing ladders, and I don't want to go in a fire.
Well, and I think they all found their own way. How about before you, like generations before you? Did you have a legacy there, or you're the first of your bunch?
It was kind of strange. Yeah. Actually, it wasn't because I just really wanted dying to be a firefighter. I needed a job.
Sure.
And went on.
Something you could do. You were healthy and young and strong. Yeah. And I thought another thing I keyed on, we've got to wind up because we're running out of time here, but one of the things I keyed on too is you said you came on board in '62 and had to pay for your own gear.
Right.
Which is, I mean, to me, it's like if you think there hadn't been advancement in 60 years or close to 60 years.
Oh, golly.
I mean, if you told a young guy today, sure, you can have this job and we're going to pay you not quite enough, and then by the way, $10 a month coming out of and it'd be more than that now, is coming out for your gear. I don't think we'd have the ability to hire young people.
You wouldn't have that many people.
No, I think you'd have a hard time.
And it's funny, real quick. I talk to the rookies, get them to sign up for the book and this and that, and usually give them a little dog and pony show about being a firefighter. And I was talking to them this time, and I thought, and I stopped. I said, you guys have got a $5,500 signing bonus. You're gonna make $24 an hour, and in a year you'll be getting close to $30 an hour. And I said, I went to work for $287 a month. I said, you realize in the last 30 minutes I talked to you, made more money than I made a year.
Yes. It's a nice perspective, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a dangerous profession, and I think it's not for everybody, obviously.
No.
I think for those of you that chose that path, we've got to be grateful and have gratitude for your generation. And I'll keep probably forevermore keep a sponge in my pickup just in case I run across a neighbor with a pasture on fire, but that's an interesting deal. But well, George, it's been a great visit with you. Thanks for taking time to come in and kind of trip down memory lane a little bit. Congratulations on being the initial Flambeau Award recipient and having the Flambeau Award named after you. I'm just super proud of our association, the years that you've spent teaching me and the countless young people that you've taught about fire service and legislative matters and just all of it. So appreciate your time, buddy, and thank you for coming to see us and sitting down a minute to kind of grab some of these great stories.
Well, I appreciate you.
I
appreciate. I hope that I can be something for whoever watches this.
Good. Well, I hope so too. Appreciate your time, my friend.
Thank you, buddy.
All right.